On behalf of the St. Lawrence College Analytics team, we're interested in looking into plants as a tool to employ in smart cities. So, the state of the world's food, meaning crops and vegetables. When we import fruits and vegetables from overseas, we have the benefit of having seasonal food all year round, better relations with neighboring countries, especially the US and Asia, and overall opportunities for capitalism. But all of these come at a cost. There's a major downside to relying solely on imports for 7 out of the 12 months of the year. One would be that millions of citizens end up stressed out and more sedentary given that they aren't eating the proper nutritional requirements. Furthermore, they have to spend more actually getting food from farm to plate rather than at the 100-mile diet that's been touted the last couple of years. And they also tends to be a reliance on more processed and genetically modified foods that have been tested in laboratories and don't always have the same genetic resilience as other domestic crops. Finally, we see more land assets, less space for boreal forests, as well as just food waste in general. So many countries in the world have started to combat some of these issues with food and have limited food wastage, have outlawed things like DDT and other illegal pesticides. But overall, there's still a lot that could be done. How much land tends to be used for agriculture is very much dependent on the size of the population and the available amount of arable land. In China, we see that it has the highest global value of areas harvested. This includes things like crops, rice paddies, and other growing situations. And with a population of well over 1 billion people, it is not really surprising that most of the land that is available for agriculture is being used. As the demand for food has increased, countries have also come to rely more so on pesticides. So when giant conglomerates, including Monsanto, want to produce more food for a population, be it in Canada or in China or in Latin America, they tend to rely more so on pesticides. Pesticides can prevent insects from destroying a crop, but it can also, using fungicides and bactericides, limit what kind of rot may occur, particularly in tropical fruits. We're not entirely sure what the long-term effects of these pesticides might be, but undoubtedly, there have been a substantial increase, particularly since the early 1990s, as shown by the graph. Another byproduct of more globalization is increased transportation costs. In order to get fruits and vegetables to their final destination, we mostly rely in Canada on transports. Transports produce, like many vehicles, lots of excess carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, particulate matter, be it 2.5 or 5, in size, nitrous oxide, as well as ground level ozone. We see in general that air pollution has increased, and particularly in the United States, we notice a large value independent of any of the activities that we have done to combat climate change. Furthermore, when we look more closely at Canada, we also see that land assets have changed. We see more development as well as loss of growing space. So as more populations move in, we tend to have less land available, be it for animals or for plants. With the creation of the North American Free Trade Agreement, we've seen many fruits and vegetables begin to come from Mexico and the United States. And although it's been relatively affordable, we do see that there's been quite a bit of increase and less reliance on our own crops in favor of more seasonally appealing crops from those countries. Given the problems associated with pesticides, pollution, air pollution, as well as other related costs, we've decided that hydroponic window gardening could provide an easy solution to some of these big picture problems. One idea would be to have a simple window garden system collecting in south-facing windows in Ontario. Beyond placing water bottles upside down. There's also the use of an air pump that allows nutrients to be circulated and for plants to be able to take root. There have been successful studies completed by NASA since the 1970s, and they've produced fruits including cherries, tomatoes, strawberries, raspberries, as well as vegetables such as leafy greens, squash, cucumbers, and others. So the opportunity to improve our own domestic yield is very high. Hydroponic gardening, meaning plants that are grown primarily in water, can easily be constructed from readily available materials. Our estimates show that a set to grow 30 heads of lettuce would cost between $30 and $50 depending on the window space available. The opportunity here is very, very high. A hydroponic window gardening system is relatively simple to maintain once it's been constructed. We see that water is a nutrient-rich resource, and by passing from one container to the other is able to replenish the resources of each plant. In the case of the lettuce, we would see things like nitrogen, water, and macronutrients passing from one to the other. Ideally, you would only have to change water once a week and a system entirely monthly. By taking the time to start a hydroponic garden as well as continue it, we see that there are major savings that any consumer could obtain. Our estimates show that the average per individual would be able to grow approximately $180 worth of tomatoes, $94 worth of lettuce, and $35 worth of strawberries. The figure before also showed major yields depending on your space available, that beyond having a hydroponic window garden, if you find space for a greenhouse, your yield could triple. There's an initial cost for all of these systems, but they are quickly overtaken by the annual savings as shown in the figure to the right. The cumulative savings from window gardenings also shows that, particularly with leafy greens, the yields are quite substantial, and over even just 100 weeks, meaning 2 years, we would see much more savings. As we continue to import fruits and vegetables at an alarmingly high rate, we will continue to struggle with some of the same problems that have existed since the 1970s. In general, Canada has seen a decrease in crop varieties, be it for wheat or corn, and there's a magnification of pollution, be it air, water, and soil pollution. Related to this is the bioaccumulation of pesticides that has been occurring on arable land. Finally, we have to hire individuals, often from other countries, to come work here for poor working conditions and whom have limited opportunities after picking our crops. Finally, there's a loss of soil fertility in any country as it continues to produce as much yield as possible, even with crop rotation. Finally, we see that there are increased food demands. The world's population is almost over 6 billion people, and we see that there's probably not going to be enough land to continue to grow all of the food that we might need. For individuals who might not be interested in gardening, there are other things that can be produced by hydroponics. Some of them include houseplants. Beyond being easy to look at and easier to care for, they actually have air pollution benefits as well. Many plants, including spider plants, bamboo, Boston ferns, Barberton daisies, dwarf date palms, and Kimberly queen ferns, are able to take up excess carbon dioxide as well as volatile organic compounds, formaldehyde and trichloroethylene, at a rate that far exceeds any of the fruiting plants. In general, they have found that these houseplants tend not to be toxic to animals either. In Canada's biggest city, Toronto, we also see that there are major contributions by nitrogen oxides and particulate matter, as well as volatile organic compounds. Toronto is uniquely situated near Chicago, Detroit, New York, and other major industrial complexes of the United States. So in addition to contributing its own industry, it is also susceptible to the poor air quality of surrounding regions. In Toronto, we see that automotive body paint and interior remodeling is responsible for the highest amount of VOCs, a known cancer causer. This presentation has described some of the challenges that Canada currently faces. It also has shown that hydroponic gardening may have a real impact at the grassroots level. If adopted, we see that families could save almost $300 a year. It would also provide fresh, readily accessible food to individuals who had as much as a window available. And finally, we think it's a better step towards sustainable living and helping to reduce pollution in its many forms. Thank you very much.